Hi, I'm Ms. Hattie from Olympian High School. We'll use the Traditions and Encounters textbook by Dr. Bentley to study the decolonization of Africa, specifically what took place in Algeria. So you should know that there were many complications, obstacles to independence and freedom and unity in Africa. Some of that included some of the economic institutions and um, systems that were created by the imperial powers prior to decolonization. There's also the Cold War going on, of course, which makes it difficult for newly emerging nations because they're forced to choose a side between the United States and the Soviet Union. And there are also some internal divisions, sectarianism, tribal conflicts that make it difficult to achieve unity after independence. We'll start by looking at North Africa, specifically at Algeria. If you don't know where that is, here's Algeria. Some other states I might mention are Morocco and Tunisia. And of course, here's France right across from Algeria. And that's really important to know because many French settlers, about 2 million of them, will be living in Algeria at the time that Algerians start to advocate for growing levels of nationalism. Specifically, the turning point is World War II. So after World War II, there's an increased call for nationalism, freedom from white European imperialists. And the French are going to resist this in the same way they resisted decolonization in East Asia, say in Vietnam. Meanwhile, they let other colonies go, like Morocco, like Tunisia, but they cling on to Algeria, and that is going to lead to a lot of violence. We'll talk about Frantz Fanon and his book, The Wretched of the Earth, which you can find with a quick Google search as well in a minute. But there will be people that say that it's necessary, like Frantz Fanon, to use violence to oust imperialists. Okay, so the first paragraph is telling you about the French resisting decolonization. It's telling you about how they let those other territories go, but wouldn't let Algeria go. Many of the former French colonies become liberated in 1960. You should know that that is called the Year of Africa because so many states become independent. But they were determined to keep Algeria largely because there were many French settlers that demanded that their government support keeping Algeria. And so at the end of World War II, there's a larger Algerian nationalist movement. There is a melee that takes place where thousands of Algerians are going to die. What essentially happens is there were Arab demonstrators in a peaceful demonstration for nationalism. And these demonstrators, peaceful demonstrators, get shot on at Sétif. And then this will lead to, the effect will be Algerian rioting, which will lead to more violence, which ultimately causes those thousands of people to die. And then the Algerians are going to organize themselves. And one of the groups that they organize is called the FLN, or the National Liberation Front. In French, it's the Front de Libération Nationale. My French is not good. But the FLN is going to utilize some of the techniques and strategies that were used in Southeast Asia against the French, largely guerrilla warfare, setting up bases in mountainous areas. But then they move into the cities, which the French weren't expecting. And in the cities, they basically organize terrorist attacks against French civilians and kill people. And the awful thing is that, well, any kind of violence is awful, but you basically there's a lot of suspicion. You have the French worried that the Algerians are aiding FLN members or that they are FLN members. You have Algerians killing other Algerians, some Algerians working for the French, some Algerians working for the FLN. Thousands of people die. Ultimately, the Algerians do gain independence, but only after thousands of deaths. As I mentioned, this conflict is going to create very strong views by certain philosophers, leaders of the time. One of those people is Frantz Fanon, who wrote the book The Wretched of the Earth. Oh, by the way, before I move on, I want to tell you about a film that I sometimes ask my students to watch for extra credit if their parents allow. It's called The Battle of Algiers, and it's a very powerful movie. So I'm going to show you just 1 minute of this clip. You guys can
Nous sommes arrivés à la moyenne de 4,2 attentats par jour. Oui, il faut distinguer les attaques individuelles. Nous disons qu'il y a une minorité qui s'impose par la terreur et la violence. Nous devons agir sur cette minorité dans le but de l'isoler et de la détruire.
بزاف باش يوصلها ويصعب له أكثر وأكثر باش ينتصر.
La France doit-elle rester en Algérie? Si vous répondez encore oui, vous devez en accepter toutes les conséquences nécessaires.
Okay, so you can watch this on your own, potentially for extra credit. Battle of Algiers, see if you can find a full-length version, if your parents allow it. You can also read The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. As I was saying, The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon this was written by a person that was inspired by his participation and witnessing of French imperialism in Algeria to write a book that essentially legitimizes the use of violence if it means an end to imperialism. So this is a unusual stance to justify violence for the sake of nationalism. And this is in the efforts or towards the ends of ending the racist degradation of the how the French were treating the Algerian people. And this is going to have a widespread influence beyond Algeria and going to influence the thinking of peoples who are fighting against racism and fighting against imperialism throughout the world.